It is 14 October 2025, a Tuesday morning at SMK Bandar Utama 4 in Selangor, Malaysia. A normal school day. A normal hour. The kind of morning no one remembers, until something happens that no one can ever forget. The corridors are alive with the usual noise, students dragging their feet between classes, prefects checking uniforms, teachers moving with the quiet rhythm of routine. Nothing about this morning suggests that it is about to become one of the darkest days in Malaysian school history. And yet at 9:30 a.m, one student steps away from the flow of activity and into a place where everything changes. Her name is Xuen. She is 16 years old, soft-featured, slender, the kind of girl who blends into a crowd because she carries herself with quietness rather than force. Her hair is dark and straight, her school uniform crisp but ordinary, a white blouse, a light blue pinafore, black shoes worn from daily use. To everyone around her, she simply looks like a normal Form 4 student starting another day of classes. She walks toward the school restroom, a space students enter every hour without thinking, a place meant to be safe. But in less than 10 minutes, it becomes the epicenter of a horror no one could have predicted. Because what happens next feels impossible inside a school. Inside the restroom, the fluorescent lights flicker quietly. No one else seems to be inside. Yap steps into one of the cubicles, closes the door, and the hallway outside returns to its usual rhythm. For about 2 minutes, nothing happens. Then a scream. Not the playful kind students sometimes exaggerate, not the startled kind when someone spills water or breaks a rule. This one is sharp, terrified, and it cuts through the corridor like metal against tile. Students nearest to the restroom freeze, teachers look up from their desks, and for a moment, no one knows what they just heard. Another scream, this time louder. And suddenly the hallway erupts with movement. A teacher rushes forward. A prefect runs for help. Students step back, unsure whether they should move closer or stay away. Within seconds, more teachers arrive at the doorway of the restroom. But the screaming stops. That silence, that instant, unnatural quiet, becomes the first sign that something is very, very wrong. Because if the screams stop that quickly, what happened inside? The teachers push inside. The floor is clean. The sinks are untouched. There is no one in sight until they move closer to the cubicles. One cubicle door is shut, locked from the inside. A teacher knocks. No answer. Another knock. Still silence. A decision has to be made. They force the lock. Someone climbs over. Someone else kicks the bottom panel. It takes seconds but feels like minutes. When the door finally gives way, the small, cramped space becomes the setting of the unimaginable. Xuen is on the floor, motionless, bleeding, unresponsive. Her school uniform is soaked, not with water, but with blood. The injuries are immediately visible, even before anyone understands the scale of what has happened. The teachers recoil. A few students who followed are pushed back out the door. Someone screams for the office to call an ambulance. Someone else calls the police. Someone collapses onto a bench outside, crying. Inside the cubicle, the smell of iron fills the air, and the question every adult is asking, silently, trembling, is simple. Who did this? If you're watching this and want more investigative breakdowns of real cases just like this one, make sure you subscribe. It helps us bring these stories to light with the depth and respect they deserve. Back inside the restroom, attempts are made to check for a pulse. A senior teacher kneels beside Yap, speaking her name softly, as if trying to pull her back from wherever she is slipping into. But nothing changes. The brutality of the injuries is overwhelming. Someone notices something else. The cubicle door has scuff marks high up, marks consistent with someone climbing over. And that detail, though no one knows it yet, aligns with what investigators later believe happened inside this small, suffocating space. Because at some point, between the moment Yap entered the restroom and the moment teachers forced open the cubicle, another student entered too. A 14-year-old male schoolmate, who allegedly climbed over the top of the cubicle door, cornered her in the tight space, and launched an attack so rapid and so violent that it ended before anyone in the hallway could react. But these are conclusions for later. In this moment, no one has answers. Only shock. Because the real nightmare begins when police arrive and realize how calculated the escape might have been. Within minutes, the sirens echo through the school gates. The The paramedics rush inside with stretchers and emergency equipment. Students gather at windows, teachers push them back, and rumors begin spreading faster than anyone can control. But inside the restroom, the paramedics already understand the truth. The injuries are too severe. The damage is irreversible. Even before they attempt intervention, the extent of the wounds makes one fact painfully clear. Xuen is gone. And yet, the brutality of what happened won't become fully known until later, when her mother reveals a detail the nation struggles to process. Her daughter was stabbed more than 200 times. For now, the school is placed into emergency lockdown. Students are ordered back to classrooms. Parents begin arriving, confused and terrified. Police tape goes up around a restroom that was ordinary just an hour ago. Now it is a crime scene. And somewhere within the school compound, the suspect, a teenager, a schoolmate, has already slipped away. Because when investigators start piecing together what happened in those few minutes, nothing about this case makes sense anymore. The restroom is sealed off within minutes. Yellow tape stretches across the doorway, and officers begin documenting everything: the walls, the floors, the sinks, the stalls. But their focus is on the cubicle where Xuen was found. A cubicle barely big enough for two people to stand inside. Yet it somehow became the site of more than 200 stab wounds. The brutality is immediately clear. Blood has pooled beneath the door, smeared in arcs across the tiles and flecked upward onto the metal partition panels, patterns that don't form from a single strike or even a few. Patterns that suggest speed, chaos, and overwhelming force. Officers enter carefully, stepping into a space that still feels thick with violence. Yap's school uniform, the light blue pinafore and white blouse every girl wears, is torn through in multiple places. Some cuts are clean, others jagged, suggesting different angles, different moments, different levels of force. Her limbs show defensive wounds. Her neck and torso show clusters of injuries so close together they almost merge. Her mother later reveals the number no one wants to imagine. More than 200 stab wounds, not the early estimate of 50. The severity confirms one thing. This was not a scuffle, not a confrontation gone wrong. This was sustained, targeted violence carried out in an extremely short window of time. Because when investigators look at the walls above the cubicle door, they notice a detail that changes everything. There are footprints, faint but present, on the outside of the cubicle door. High up, too high for normal use. They match the tread of school shoes. Officers photograph them carefully because this is the first clue to how the attacker even entered the cubicle. According to early investigative findings, a 14-year-old male schoolmate allegedly climbed over the top of the cubicle door, dropping inside while Yap was alone. The cubicle is narrow, barely shoulder width, yet it became the entire world in which the attack unfolded. Inside this confined space, investigators reconstruct the sequence. Yap would have been trapped. The attacker would have been between her and the only exit, and there was nowhere to run. The blood patterns indicate the attack began immediately. The arc-like stains on the metal panel show rapid, repeated motion. The droplets on the ceiling reveal the angle of upward strikes. The smears across the lock panel show contact, desperate, frantic, as she fought to reach the door. Because the angle of the wounds reveals something investigators did not expect. The wounds on her torso and neck are deep and consistent, but the wounds on her legs, dozens of them, appear to have been inflicted as she collapsed. This means the attack continued even after she was down. The brutality shocks even the seasoned officers inside the room. Not just the number of injuries, but the determination behind them. And then there's the escape. The same marks on the top of the cubicle door appear again, this time on the inside. The suspect didn't leave through the door. He climbed back over. He used the same route to disappear as quickly as he appeared. Meaning the attack was carried out and completed in a contained cycle. Entry, violence, exit, all within the quiet of a school morning. If you want to keep following this investigation as we break it down piece by piece, make sure you subscribe. It helps us bring you clear, factual case reconstructions without sensationalism or speculation. Back inside the restroom, investigators continue examining every surface. The weapon, still not publicly detailed, appears to have been small but sharp enough to cause rapid injuries. The pattern of wounds suggests repeated uninterrupted force, not hesitation. One officer examines the hinges of the cubicle door. There is no sign that the attacker tried to break out. He didn't need to. He was focused, efficient. He entered and exited using the same elevated route, leaving the door locked from the inside. A detail that delayed entry just long enough for the attack to be fatal. Because when investigators examine the timeline, the window of violence becomes even more disturbing. Yap entered the restroom around 9:30 a.m. The screams began only minutes later. The teachers forced their way in almost immediately after. And by the time they reached her, the attack was over. Meaning the attacker inflicted more than 200 wounds in less time than it takes to complete a routine classroom attendance check. Every second inside that cubicle mattered. Every second was used. Police moved their focus to the students in nearby classrooms. They want to know whether anyone saw someone climbing, whether anyone noticed a student acting strangely, whether anyone saw signs of blood on clothing or hands. But the restroom is positioned in a part of the corridor where visibility is limited, and the attacker chose a moment when no one else was inside. Investigators begin to understand how the attacker assaulted without being seen. The location, the timing, the element of isolation. Then a new detail emerges. Teachers who first responded describe seeing movement in the corridor, a student walking quickly away, head down, not running but not moving normally either. Later, this becomes critical because police located the 14-year-old suspect shortly after the attack. But the brutality inside the cubicle remains the centerpiece of the investigation, because every inch of the space tells the same story. Overwhelming violence, limited time, a trapped victim, and an attacker who climbed in and climbed out with deliberate intent. Because when investigators finish documenting the scene, they leave with one question that will drive the rest of the case. How can someone so young commit an act this violent? The boy is arrested quickly. It happens within hours of the attack. Police confirm he is 14 years old, a student from the same school, and that he was near the scene shortly after the incident. He is taken into custody under Malaysia's Child Act, and investigators begin piecing together his movements, step by step, minute by minute, from the start of the school day until the moment he was found. But the first thing the investigators want is clarity. What exactly happened inside that cubicle? And how did a student manage to slip into a restroom unnoticed, commit an act of unimaginable violence, and then disappear back into the school as if nothing happened? To answer that, they begin the slow process of interviewing everyone inside the building. By the end of the week, police have taken 127 statements. Students, teachers, prefects, counselors, administrative staff, anyone who might have seen or heard something, no matter how small, becomes part of the official record. Because among these 127 statements lies a detail that investigators did not expect. Several students recall seeing the suspect walking away from the restroom corridor shortly after the screams. Not running, not panicked, just moving fast with his head low, avoiding eye contact. It isn't enough to reconstruct a motive. It isn't enough to establish premeditation, but it does help investigators lock down the timeline of his movements. At the same time, officers search the suspect's belongings. They interview his parents. They request school counseling records. Every detail is examined to understand whether there were warning signs, conflicts, or behavioral issues that might have predicted violence. But what investigators find instead is unsettling. Silence, a lack of a clear motive, a lack of any obvious conflict between the attacker and the victim. The more statements they gather, the sharper one question becomes, why her? Because the person who answers that question first isn't the police, it's the victim's mother. In the days after the murder, Yap Xing's mother speaks to the media. Her voice is steady, but her words cut through the confusion, the rumors, the misinformation. She confirms publicly that her daughter suffered more than 200 stab wounds. She begs the public to stop spreading false details, stop turning her daughter's death into online speculation, and stop sharing exaggerated claims about the crime scene. Her confirmation becomes a turning point, because it removes all doubt. The attack was not minor, it was not exaggerated, it was as brutal as early reports suggested, and worse. This is the moment the public outrage begins to surge. Parents across Malaysia demand answers from the school. How was the weapon brought in? Why wasn't the restroom monitored? How did a student manage to climb into a cubicle unnoticed? How could so many wounds be inflicted before anyone intervened? And in the center of this storm stands the school principal. He steps forward at a press conference, his voice breaking as he apologizes to the parents, to the community, and especially to Yap's family. He promises a full safety review, surveillance, monitoring, gatekeeping, student protocols, counseling engagement, anything that can prevent another tragedy like this. If you want more investigations told factually and responsibly, take a second to subscribe. It helps us keep stories like this clear, accurate, and respectful. Even as the school reviews its security, the police investigation escalates. They bring in specialized officers to interpret the blood patterns from the cubicle. Forensic examiners analyze the wounds to determine speed, angle, and sequence. Child psychologists are brought in to assess the suspect, a legal requirement because of his age. The investigation grows larger, faster, and more intense than typical juvenile cases, and for one reason. The brutality is unprecedented for a Malaysian school setting. Because when a case involves a child suspect, every detail must be handled differently. The suspect is placed in a juvenile facility rather than in a standard holding cell. His identity is fully protected by Malaysian law. His statements must be taken in the presence of guardians or legal representatives. And his psychological state becomes an essential part of the investigation. But despite all these layers, investigators still need one thing. A clear narrative of what happened from the moment the suspect entered the restroom corridor to the moment he exited it after the attack. They cross-reference student statements with CCTV angles around the school. They track timestamps. They match observations with the blood evidence inside the cubicle. They look for inconsistencies, contradictions, slips in memory. The timeline they reconstruct is chillingly short. Yap entered the restroom around 9:30 a.m. The suspect followed within minutes. There is no sign of an argument, no sign of a struggle outside the cubicle. No witness saw the two talking beforehand. Inside the cubicle, the violence unfolded quickly. Outside, the school continued with normal classes. And then, almost as quickly as he entered, the suspect climbed out and vanished back into the flow of the school day. Parents who spoke to the media call the case a wake-up call. They say it exposes cracks in student oversight, mental health systems, and internal school safety protocols. Commentators echo this, emphasizing how easily an ordinary school day can mask something catastrophic. Meanwhile, the investigation continues, moving forward. Medical examiners finalize their reports. Juvenile officers evaluate the suspect's mental state. The forensic timeline strengthens. The witness accounts are compiled into a structured sequence. But even with all this evidence, the biggest question remains unanswered. Why would a 14-year-old commit an act with this level of brutality? And that question sets the stage for the storm that follows. The national outrage, the misinformation, the safety debates, and the emotional fallout that Malaysia has never fully recovered from. But the more details investigators release, the more uncomfortable the national conversation becomes, because the truth isn't just horrifying, it's systemic. The Education Ministry issues a short statement. They are monitoring the situation. But parents want more than monitoring. They want accountability. Some demand metal detectors, others demand psychological screenings, and many insist the security lapses exposed by Yap's death are nothing new, just tragically ignored until now. As coverage intensifies, something even darker emerges. Scammers begin circulating fake QR codes online, pretending to raise funds for the victim's family. These codes spread through WhatsApp groups faster than police can issue warnings. Only when Yap's family publicly speaks out does the scam finally lose traction. But behind every headline, behind every angry Facebook post, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. No one actually understands how this happened, because the official narrative is still being built piece by painful piece. Mental health advocates step forward. They argue that Malaysian schools have been facing rising behavioral problems among youth for years. Counselors are overworked. Teachers are undertrained for crisis behavior. and students rarely seek help because of stigma. For the first time in a long time, a crime forces the country to look in the mirror. But while the public debates systemic reform, the victim's family simply grieves. Her mother, who earlier clarified the true number of wounds, now withdraws from the media except for one message, begging people to stop spreading rumors, blaming innocent students, or twisting the story for drama. She says her daughter deserves dignity, not speculation. And just as the public begins demanding harsher punishments, another complication arises, one that intensifies the national divide. Because the suspect is just 14 years old. Under Malaysian law, he cannot be named, he cannot be sentenced like an adult, and any trial involving him will be closed to the public. The country finds itself torn between two realities. A child committed an unimaginably violent act, yet he is still, legally and developmentally, a child. The outrage grows louder. People ask whether the law is outdated. Others argue the focus should be on prevention, not punishment. But the one thing everyone agrees on is simple. This must never happen again. And before we continue, if you want to follow more investigative breakdowns like this, cases that expose the truth behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe. It helps us create deeper, more cinematic reporting like this one. As the days pass, the school tries to return to normal, but normal no longer exists. The restroom where Yap died is closed indefinitely. Some students refuse to use any school bathrooms at all. Counselors set up temporary support rooms, guiding teenagers who are suddenly aware of how fragile safety really is. A memorial grows outside the gate, flowers, handwritten notes, paper cranes. One message stands out: school is supposed to protect us. But the grief soon transforms into something else, a demand for structural accountability that goes far beyond one school. Parents' associations call for immediate security upgrades nationwide. NGOs push for mental health budgets to be increased. Even former educators begin speaking publicly, admitting that Malaysia's school safety framework hasn't been updated for years. Meanwhile, investigators work quietly. They continue collecting statements. They analyze the cubicle for every clue. They review CCTV footage from the hallway, mapping the suspect's movements. The police keep repeating one line at every press briefing: please avoid speculation. The investigation is ongoing. But speculation doesn't stop. It only mutates. Rumors claim Yap was targeted. Others claim the attack was random. None of these theories is confirmed. And because the suspect is a minor, many details will never be released. Which leaves the public with a chilling reality. Some answers may never reach them. By the end of the first week, the tragedy had reached international coverage. Foreign outlets report the brutality of the attack, the age of the suspect, and the growing unrest among Malaysian parents. Commentators compare it to rare but devastating acts of school violence in other countries. But for Malaysians, this isn't a statistic. It's personal. Because this case wasn't about radicalization, gang conflict, or an armed intruder. It was one student, inside a bathroom, on an ordinary school morning. The Ministry of Education meets with senior administrators from the district. Safety protocols are reviewed. Security drills are proposed. Additional counselors are requested. But parents aren't waiting. Many hire private mental health professionals for their children. Others demand stricter supervision in hallways and restrooms, and some quietly transfer their kids to other schools. But even as reforms begin, and even as the nation tries to heal, one truth stays fixed. The shock of 14th of October 2025 changed Malaysia. Not symbolically, literally. A teenage girl, loved by her family, respected by her teachers, and completely unsuspecting, was killed in a place meant to protect her. By someone her own age, in seconds. And the echoes of that morning, inside a locked toilet cubicle, still shake an entire nation today.